And joining me now from Boston is Jim Walsh. He's an international security expert and a research associate at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Why don't I start there? Give me your thoughts first, what you're hearing from Seoul and Beijing, your reactions.
Well, I think that summed it up right there. Obviously, Seoul is staking out a tougher stance, talking in detail about how it would punish and destroy North Korea if it was ever attacked. So I think President Park is taking out a pretty tough stance and is using the test as a political opportunity to continue to push for THAAD, the Theater High Altitude Area Defense or Ballistic Missile Defense Program. I think, though, that the recent test, and perhaps a future test, Mike, we might get in the next week or so, does present an opportunity to move in a different direction. I think, everyone pushing at each other hasn't really produced much in the way of results. We just get more of the same. So my guess is we should probably be thinking about doing something differently. And I'm hoping that this nuclear test presents an opportunity for the U.S. and China to hit the reset button. There had been some cooperation earlier in the year, March, April, May. Then things sort of went off the rails. I'm hoping the two big powers here can get back on the same page. Because if you're going to solve this problem, you're not going to do it unless you get the U.S. and China working together. But
THAAD presents a problem there in a sense because China is not very happy about placing THAAD in South Korea. How do you get, is that basically like poking a hornet's nest? It's undoubtedly agitating the DPRK in a way, too.
Yeah, my issue on THAAD is more with China than the DPRK. And I have to admit that my position is unusual here. I don't have a lot of friends in my camp. But I just don't see the need for it. South Korea is not, until recently, has not been begging for THAAD. The U.S., in my view, has sort of pushed this onto South Korea, made them swallow it. It's not really going to accomplish anything in the short term. And what it really does, though, is it makes China angry. So we have a strategy now where we're going to try to force China to cooperate by making it angry and doing things it doesn't want. I don't know that that's a really smart way to go about things, to punish people in order that they cooperate with you. So I think, but what's true here is both countries have a common interest in not having progress in this nuclear program. The problem isn't going to be solved without China, and the U.S. and China sharing that should try to find a way to a middle position. Now, the U.S. and China are going to disagree about other issues. They're going to disagree about South China Sea. They're going to disagree about this and that. That's fine. But on this, where there's common national interest, they really need to start working cooperatively and innovatively. We can't continue to do the same thing over and over again if it's shown to be failing, and it is.
And so would you suggest that sanctions, that falls in the same category? It doesn't seem to be having any impact. People talking about sanctions again.
Well, I think my colleague John Park at Harvard and I recently published a study on sanctions. And sanctions can be useful. They're not a magic wand. They can be useful, but they have to be married to a political strategy. By themselves, they're not going to do anything here. They have to be in service of a political strategy that does include negotiations. Even though the Pyongyang government is reprehensible, you still have to be able to sit down and talk to them. That's why the Iran deal worked. There were sanctions plus diplomacy that led to an agreement. But we make other suggestions. China, for example, in our view, should be using some of its domestic laws. Leave sanctions aside, use some of the domestic laws it has, anti-corruption campaign, anti-counterfeiting, anti-drug trafficking, and focus that enforcement on the private Chinese companies that are doing business with North Korea, Inc., the organizations whose job it is to get around sanctions. North Korea has innovated in the face of sanctions, but we're still doing the same old, same old. And I think China can have a big impact here if it goes after those Chinese citizens who are helping North Korea import WMD-related technology.
Jim, we're out of time, but just briefly, if you will, is it the six-party talks? Do they need to start up again? Is that what you're suggesting?
I don't care if it's four-party talks over a peace agreement or six-party talks or, I don't really care. But I think at some point there has to be some dialogue here. Now, it takes two to tango, or maybe it takes six to tango. And North Korea may not be in the mood to do this, and so that's on them. But I think you have to keep a line of communication open, first to take advantage of opportunities you might not be expecting, but also to protect yourself so that you don't miss a signal that then leads to crisis. So I'm in favor of some sort of communication, some sort of dialogue, whatever the shape of the table.
Jim Walsh joining us from Boston. Thanks so much.